Okay, so I'm going to try and cut this into 3 parts, each one being around 5 minutes to help upload them so it's not just one huge file. So the next supplement I will talk about is creatine. And as you can see here, there's actually been a lot of research into creatine. It's one of the most researched supplements along with steroids because it's very commonly used. And it increases energy, performance enhancing, increases muscle growth. It actually helps increase memory because creatine is when it enters your body, it becomes a phosphocreatine, something along those lines. And 90% or 95% of it is in your muscles, like skeletal muscles. And then the rest, 5 or 10%, is in your brain and liver. So they believe that since some of it is in your brain, it helps your brain process information faster, help you remember things. So creatine was created in 1832 by Eugene Chevril, and it leads to an increase in ATP. So what ATP is it's your muscles' energy. It's what your muscles use as food, honestly. And without ATP, your muscles won't function properly. So what this does is it increases the maximum amount of ATP your body can hold. And it increases growth of your muscles and density and strength, so all around it is great for muscles. It helps increase what a lot of people call water weight, because creatine, it severely dehydrates you, or it makes you need to absorb more water. So one of the biggest things is you need to stay up on your water if you're drinking creatine. So the side effects of creatine, the largest side effects, like I said, is the dehydration. So, and what this dehydration does is ATP requires water, and then creatine also requires water, and since creatine increases total amount of ATP, your muscles are absorbing a lot more water than what they normally would if you weren't taking creatine. And if used improperly, like you don't properly hydrate with it, it can lead to liver problems, kidney problems. Nothing too severe. It can lead to kidney stones, just kind of pains down the road. And it will definitely result in weight gain because your body is holding more water. So when you will normally drink about a gallon a day, it'll bump you up to probably a gallon and a half, 2 gallons a day if you're using it properly. Because the average amount of creatine you will take per day is when you first start it, they want you to do around 15 to 20 grams per day drinking it and making sure that you stay up on water. And then the week after, once when your body gets kind of used to creatine, they'll start giving it just 5 grams a day. Nothing too crazy, just 5 grams a day helps your muscles bulk up. And creatine also can cause nausea, stomach problems, diarrhea, but that all also goes along with proper hydration if people aren't properly hydrating. Creatine is one of the supplements that I personally use, and I've found that it helps. It's bumped my body weight from 180 to 185-ish, 190-ish. So creatine, I've had no problems with it. It's been very healthy for me so far. So I have a video about questions that have been answered or asked and answered about creatine.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jose Antonio. I am the CEO of the International Society of Sports Nutrition. I'm also a researcher at Nova Southeastern University in Davie, Florida. And today I want to talk to you about creatine, specifically creatine monohydrate, since that is the primary form of the supplement that we've all probably used. Now, what is creatine? Creatine is basically an amino acid derived substrate or fuel. It comes from methionine, arginine, and glycine, and creatine is found primarily really in your skeletal muscle. And what is it used for? Well, let's talk about the dosing. Do you need to do a loading protocol for creatine? Well, it really depends on your goals. If you're currently not taking creatine, doing that loading protocol for 1 week of roughly 20 grams per day is certainly something you should do. If you're currently taking creatine, then you don't need to load on it at all. You just stay on a maintenance dose of roughly 3 to 6 grams per day, and that should be sufficient. Well, what does creatine do to lean body mass? Well, what's exciting about creatine is that there's probably not a single supplement that has more research behind it in terms of elevating lean body mass than creatine monohydrate. We know from probably well over 300 studies that if you consume creatine monohydrate in a dose of roughly 5 grams a day for 2 months, maybe 3 months, you'll get a significant increase in lean body mass. And with that increase in lean body mass, an increase in strength and even in muscular endurance. Does creatine promote a gain in fat mass? Well, what's interesting about creatine is that you actually don't gain any fat from it. It's purely, you might say, an anabolic fuel or anabolic substrate. It does promote just an increase in lean body mass with no effect on fat mass. What about creatine for special populations like children and the elderly? Well, this is where it gets kind of interesting. When you're dealing with the elderly, particularly since losing muscle, which is what we call sarcopenia, since losing muscle with age is such an issue, it's probably important that older people consume creatine, because there is data to show that in 60 to 80-year-olds, that creatine monohydrate can indeed help increase lean body mass and strength, so that helps with activities of daily living. What about creatine for kids? And this is where it gets a little bit more controversial. There's actually data in teenage athletes that if you give them creatine, they actually perform better. And this was in a specific group of what are called fin swimmers. They actually perform better after loading for a week on creatine. And there's also data to show that in kids with traumatic brain injury, that creatine will help protect the brain, or at least help you recover faster. And they were giving these kids really quite high doses. So is it safe for kids as well as for older adults? Really, the answer to that is yes. The safety data on creatine is unparalleled. It's one of the safest supplements out there. What about creatine for, let's say, vegetarians or vegans? They actually will benefit the most, and the reason they benefit the most is because they typically don't get any creatine in their diet, because creatine is typically found in meats and in fish. So if you don't eat meat or fish, the only way you're going to get creatine, at least exogenously, is to supplement, and they're the ones who are going to get the most bang for the buck, so to speak, because their endogenous levels or internal levels are so low to begin with. So it helps them quite a bit. I think another area of research that's cool with creatine is the effects on brain function. If you look at some of the data on memory, taking creatine monohydrate will improve memory, and again, in particular, in those who are vegetarian or vegan, because their normal intake of creatine is really it's really quite insufficient. Now, what about responders versus non-responders? Who responds to creatine? Well, we know this, that if you have a lot of fast twitch fibers, or what are called type 2 fibers, that you seem to be a better responder than someone who has a lot of type 1 or slow twitch fibers. The primary difference between your type 1 and type 2 fibers, let me give you athlete examples. Your type 1 fibers, primarily slow twitch, it has a lot of endurance, so you see that in marathon runners, for instance. The type 2 fibers are what we call fast twitch, and you see that a lot in for instance, sprinters. Most of us are probably a mixture of it. People who do bodybuilding, again, are probably a mixture of it, but again, if you're at one extreme, which is type 1 or slow, versus the other extreme, which is type 2 or fast, you'll excel in those events. What about the question of when you should take creatine? What's interesting is I actually did a timing study on creatine that showed, at least initially, taking it post-workout works better than pre-workout. Now, there's a caveat to that. I think if you're on creatine chronically, let's say you've been taking it for years and years and years, it probably does not matter if you take it in the morning, the evening, pre-workout or post-workout, as long as you get your roughly 5 grams per day. Now, if you cycle on and off it, and let's say you're competing or preparing for an athletic event, then probably it would make sense to take it post-workout, so at least, there's at least some suggestive data to show that might be a little bit better than pre-workout. So is timing an issue? It's an issue if you're not taking it regularly. If you're taking it regularly, it's probably not that big an issue. For more information on sports nutrition and supplements, like you just heard, come back to bodybuilding.com.
So, as I have said before, with creatine, it is one that I've personally used, and throughout my high school career, I have always been a type 2 muscle. I've always done sprints, long jump. Football alone, it's like about 5 seconds each play of going fast, going as hard as you can. So creatine has really helped with that. It is it's like he said, it's one of the safest ones because how much research we have put into this supplement. And I'm getting close to the 10 minutes, so I'll shut this one down.